Hi, and welcome to Choose Agape. I'm not at home at the moment. I haven't got my navy walls and my usual Choose Agape poster. I'm on my holidays in the Lake District, but the conversations don't have to stop. And today I spoke with Pierpaolo Finaldi of the Catholic Truth Society, and who's also Master of the Keys of the Catholic Writers Guild of England and Wales. And we spoke about his work in both these areas. I hope you enjoy it. Hi, Pierpaolo Finaldi. How are you?
Very well. Good to be speaking with you.
Good. It's great to see you. You are Chief Exec and Publisher at the Catholic Truth Society. And I want to start by asking you, what brought you to what you're doing now?
Well, no, I come from a kind of large Catholic family. I'm one of 8 children. I think it was my parents that really kind of reverted to the faith in the sort of late 70s. And in fact, if anything, I'm the fruit of their reversion. As you know, they kind of decided to go for the full big Catholic family after that, and I was the first one that they had kind of after their reversion. So we grew up in a big, happy sort of Italian, Polish, very practicing family, and so I mean, in terms of working within the church, it just seemed like the most natural thing in the world, you know, to do something. I mean, not many people get to work in a job that really fulfills both the kind of mission as a Christian and also is kind of very interesting and creative. And I just sort of bless God to have been able to do that. And it was a very kind of chance thing. I think the previous chief exec at CTS was a friend of my brother's, and they were looking for a student to exploit in the mid-90s, and I was game. And well, I've kind of been there pretty much ever since, with a break for a few years working for the Archdiocese of Southwark. So I became CEO in 2019, had a wonderful first 5 months, and then COVID came, and you know, the rest is history. But no, we're doing lots of interesting things, and I think we've been through the worst of it now, and yeah, so that's that really.
Yeah, what are you doing there that you think isn't being done elsewhere?
So I think CTS has a very interesting kind of niche in. I mean, it's over 150 years old. As a publisher. It was set up by a young priest who went on to become the Cardinal Archbishop of Westminster, Herbert Vaughan. And he had a kind of very interesting experience when we went over to the States. He saw Protestants in particular who were kind of handing out little booklets outside Catholic churches, trying to show these awful Catholics the error of their ways. And I think he felt that could be quite an interesting thing to bring back to the UK. I mean, bear in mind, this was all happening at the same time as the Catholics had just been emancipated in the UK. The hierarchy was being re-established, so there was a real opportunity for Catholicism to once more take quite an important place in British society. However, what Herbert Vaughan saw was that there was a lot of ignorance and a lot of prejudice against Catholics. And being a kind of poor immigrant church, there was a lot of ignorance about the faith also within the church. So I think he thought there was a real opportunity to educate the Catholics themselves better, and also to do a bit of apologetics in the world around us. And so right from the beginning, there were these 2 kind of missions, sort of ad extra. He said dissipating popular prejudice against Catholicism, and ad intra, you know, within the church, helping people to know more of their faith so that they could speak with greater confidence to the world around them, and also simply to, you know, you can't love what you don't know, you can't pass on what you don't know. And so I think for him it was very important to produce small, simple, cheap books that could help the ordinary Catholic to know his faith better, but also to practice it better. So right from the beginning, there were kind of catechetical booklets, and there were also devotional booklets. And I think he saw the importance, not just of knowing the faith intellectually, but also of practicing it sincerely and with intentionality. And essentially, I think we've followed that impulse that Father Herbert Vaughan, at the time, later Cardinal Vaughan, that impulse that he kind of set in motion, and very quickly it was passed over to be run by lay people, and it has been run as a very I would say kind of fairly successful apostolate, but also an apostolate that always had very clear that it was there to serve the church, not, neither to the left nor to the right, but kind of straight down the line, authentic, full strength Catholicism, albeit in a very manageable format.
Yeah. How important is it, do you think, that you present the work in a beautiful way? I know Bishop Barron talks about this, doesn't he? And his Word on Fire apostolate, some of the stuff there that's produced, the Bible and some of the magazines that they put out, they're so beautiful. And he speaks about how that's really important, because the words are the same, but they're surrounded by this beautiful page and this beautiful cover. And he speaks about how important that is. Do you feel the same in the work that you're producing, that there's also something to be said for wrapping it in that beauty and surrounding it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think we were doing that when Word on Fire was a twinkle in Bishop Barron's eye. No, in the sense that Catholicism has always provided the church with a great deal of beauty, whether that's in the architecture of our cathedrals, whether that's in the beauty of the music that we've produced, Palestrina, up to there's so many we could mention, or to the art itself and poetry. So Catholicism and beauty have always been kind of natural bedfellows. Now, I think for sure we could say that connection has become less kind of rock solid in the last I don't know, 50, 100 years. But certainly one of the things that when you work in the media is that the packaging is very important. Sure, you can't judge a book completely by its cover, but the cover is very important nonetheless to draw people in. And I think one of the things that my predecessor did, and together with me, kind of in the 90s, we were going around looking, what does the secular publishing world, how does it package its stuff? And our stuff has to be at least as beautiful, because we can't just say, well, we have the truth and therefore it doesn't matter kind of how we package it or how we present it. No, the presentation is very important. And in fact, I think as you see the importance, if you see the true kind of importance and weight of what you're putting across, I think naturally you will want to put it across in the most kind of beautiful way possible. And I think, a few years ago, in 2011, when CTS started its liturgical publishing, we produced the new translation of the Roman Missal, and it was very interesting to see what was being done with the translation itself. It was a translation which was supposed to be more faithful to the Latin. It was a translation which was supposed to be more elevated in a kind of slightly higher language. And so we decided, it felt natural to do the same with the book. So we made a very beautiful book in, leather bound, with silk ribbons, with gold, Florentine blocking, all these beautiful things that basically the best that modern book binding has to offer. And when we presented the first copy to Pope Benedict, he kind of leafed through it, and in perfect English, with the lovely German accent, he said, it's very important that the books that we use to celebrate the liturgy are beautiful, because that has an effect on the way that we celebrate the liturgy. And I think the same can be said for the prayer books that lay people use. You know, if we have a beautiful book in our hands, it will kind of raise us to something higher. And for example, last year we produced the Book of Hours for the Ordinariate, and I have to say I think it's the most beautiful kind of prayer book that we've ever made. It's fantastic. It's stitched gold and red, you know, gilding, very beautiful typesetting. And it's a book which you can't help but be drawn into prayer as you leaf through it. And I think that's so important, especially for books which are meant for prayer, but also in catechesis. So, for example, we helped the Sycamore project that Father Stephen Wang has produced with an accompanying book to the series. And I think if you leaf through that, you'll see some of the beauty of Catholicism just in the images and the way that it's laid out, the care that's taken. I mean, this is meant for people who are kind of coming back to the faith or finding out about it for the first time. And so to present them with something which shows love as well, it shows love for them. And we're not just like chucking, you know, it's like a meal. We're not just chucking some microwaved, you know, pizza. It's something that's done with care, with love for the people who are doing it, and with love for the subject. And I think that's so important. And it says a lot about the faith itself and how seriously we take it.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because there are people who will criticize the Pope. I know Pope Benedict was criticized for some of the clothes that he wore, and then Pope Francis came along and seemed a bit more simple. And now we have people saying, look at this huge cathedral, what if we knock it down and we can give money to the poor? And I think they're missing something, some of which you've just explained there. But I think it's really important that we have this beauty, that we have these beautiful cathedrals rising up and that we're in awe of. And if we just level everything and have everything the same at this low level, I think we lose something that the human spirit, that the human person really needs.
Absolutely. And also, I think one of the problems is that when we think about, oh, you know, that beautiful cathedral or that beautiful painting belongs to the church, people, especially in the kind of secular world, make the mistake of thinking it belongs to like the priests or something, or it belongs to the hierarchy. But it doesn't. You know, I, as a Catholic, when I walk into the Sistine Chapel, or when I walk into the cathedral in Monreale in Sicily, that's mine. I mean, as a Catholic, that belongs to me. You know, I leave my little home in South London, my sort of modest house, and I walk into the most beautiful places in the world, and I feel almost more at home there. You know, they belong to us, and they serve a function, which is to kind of elevate us towards God. You know, if our churches look like our houses or worse, you know, they don't do that job of kind of lifting us up. Everything in the church should kind of point us towards our ultimate end. And so I think it's very kind of short-sighted to think that you know, we should build it differently, or we should, you know, sell them off, you know, to become luxury hotels or whatever that are only then accessible to the rich. Whereas now the church and the cathedrals are accessible to everyone, to the very poorest. You know, they belong to us. Yeah.
I definitely have an experience. In my 20s, I was not I was raised a Catholic in a Catholic family, and then fell away quite far away, and was quite angry about Catholicism, and spent my time trying to disabuse people of their stupid notions. And I went into Sainte-Chapelle in Paris, and I was just silent. Right. I was just silent, and actually the tears came, and I couldn't really explain why. And just being there did something to me that there's no words that could have been spoken. I had discussions with people, but just being there in the beauty of this church was, you know, it shifted something and moved something in me that then began a journey to where I am now. And that's, if we just knock that down and we just eradicate that,
we lose that. People lose that opportunity to, it touches something deep inside us, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it can also kind of cut through maybe some of the intellectual barriers that we've kind of built up. And also it makes it kind of simpler. It makes it easier for us to believe, in a sense. I mean, I had an experience recently. In fact, it was for the launch of the breviary for the Ordinariate. We went to, there was evensong and then benediction, and I was the benediction was done very beautifully. It was big monstrance, big golden monstrance with a crown. There was lots of incense. There was wonderful music, and when the priest turned around to give benediction, the organ swelled, and everything kind of helped you to understand that Christ was truly there. And I just kind of compared that to other experiences that I've had of, more kind of minimalist benedictions with, a tiny little monstrance, and where you had to do a lot of intellectual work to believe that Christ, you had to kind of tell yourself, okay, Christ is there, Christ is there. Whereas there, everything was kind of helping you to understand the truth. And I think, the beauty of cathedrals like Saint-Chapelle and places like that, that's what they do. They kind of short circuit you. They go straight to, the heart. Sometimes when our mind gets in the way. Not that we're ever against, the intellectual understanding of these things, but sometimes we can build up lots of barricades against God, and sometimes he has to cut through that, and he does that with beauty. For me, with music especially, but
oh really? Tell me about that. What in what way does that cut through for you?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes you need something that kind of goes beyond language, beyond the ordinary words that we use every day. And I've just always found that kind of music kind of resonates like that. It kind of cuts straight to your heart. Yeah. And certain pieces of music, certain whatever it is, Fauré's Requiem or a beautiful melody from Palestrina or something like that, it will just go straight to your heart and give you an experience of hopefully what it's like to listen to the choirs of angels directly.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So Italian, let's get on to Italian, the difference between Italian and English Catholicism.
Well, I mean, I probably surprise you in saying that when it comes to actually going to church, or my experience of the liturgy of the Mass, I much prefer the English the way of doing things. I mean, I think one of the things that you'll find, I think, when you go to many churches in Italy, is that they haven't had all the kind of advantages of the kind of musical tradition that has kind of existed uninterruptedly in England, in the Anglican Church as well. So things like cathedral choir schools that we have in say in Westminster or in the Oratory in London, those things just don't really exist in Italy. So you will often get a far more beautiful, a far more dignified liturgy here than you would in Italy. Also because when post-Vatican II, when congregational singing became kind of a thing in the Catholic Church, in Italy they didn't have the kind of Protestant hymn tradition to fall back on that we do here in the UK. And so they're kind of looking around. So, well, what can we use? There were only devotional hymns in Italian, hymns that were used for kind of Marian processions and things. Other than that, there was nothing. So in a sense, all they had was, the musical language of the time, and that's, we're talking about in the 1970s. So you get a lot of the kind of folk stuff, a lot of sub Simon and Garfunkel is used still in Italian churches as their only way of singing. Now, so from that perspective, I always get I always feel I get a better experience in the UK than I do in Italy. However, when it comes to the domestic church, I think that it's kind of different. And you know, I mean, bear in mind that my experience of the kind of Italian family was, you know, my father left Italy in the 1950s, and when immigrants kind of remain slightly kind of stuck in the time when they leave their country. So, you know, the big Italian family, you know, eating out in the garden and all the rest of it, and loads of children, that in a sense, that was Italy in the 1950s. Yeah. It's still the experience of my family, but it's not really the experience of Italians in Italy now anymore. You know, Italy has one of the lowest birth rates in the world. You know, that you're probably more likely to get a big English family than a big Italian family now. But certainly in terms of the way that the liturgical calendar is lived in the home, you know, with the feast days and the different foods for the different feasts and you know, the different traditions, certainly that was something that my parents, both from the Italian side and the Polish side, in fact, kind of kept going in the family. And I think certainly for English Catholicism, those kinds of things had been kind of, you know, in a sense, been beaten out of or persecuted out of the church in the UK, and it's something that's that, you know, needs to be rediscovered. And I mean, it's always difficult to kind of construct traditions, but you know, there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. You know, lots of groups online where you can find out more about liturgical living, about the kinds of, you know, special recipes or special things to do for feast days, so that we can live a more articulated life. You know, I think the human being needs to live, you know, moments of feast and moments of fast. And one of the problems, I think, of the you know, the Protestant work ethic that we suffer from here in Northern Europe, is that there's no kind of difference through the year. You're just working all the way through the year. When my wife came from Sicily, when we got married, one thing that she couldn't kind of bear in England was that it never really slowed down. You're kind of just working at the same speed kind of all year round. Whereas in Sicily, you know, it starts, you know, you get to kind of 40 degrees around kind of May time until September. So everybody just slows down for a few months and then picks up again.
Yeah.
So I think that's really a difference, is how we can articulate our life through the year. The church wants us to do that, and yet, you know, I think in the UK it's quite difficult to do that. You know, we only have bank holidays. We don't have, you know, the feast days that you still kind of get off in Italy and other countries. You know, albeit most people don't celebrate them religiously. At least here, you know, at least you could if you wanted. So I don't know. I think that's my little, I suppose, how I've experienced it anyway.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful to hear that, actually, because it does feel sometimes we're just racing through this on this treadmill. You know, we feel like we're rushing around, we're doing this, I mean, we as Catholics, we try at least stop on a Sunday. Yeah. But even then, I've found, you know, I've sort of hush, hope no one finds out, I've just nipped Sainsbury's. but because it does feel like we're constantly busy, and so I think bringing back that idea of trying to have a better spread, a better pace in our lives is so important. Yeah, go on.
There's one thing I'd say about that. I mean, I think you have to be very intentional about this. Yeah. Especially about the Sunday. And one thing that we have 7 children, and one thing that I found quite interesting is that, for example, a lot of sports and a lot of activities tend to be done on Sunday morning, you know, whether it's football or whatever. And I think we had to make it kind of quite clear to the kids quite early on that the priority for the Sunday was always it was a day centered on God and on the family. And so if there was ever any clash between an activity and mass or family time, then always mass and family time came first. And I think that's just something that I think, you know, parents, if they want to show their children where the priority lies, then that's like a good way of doing it. That no, you know, in the end, sports are great and there's nothing wrong with them, etc. But God first.
Yeah, definitely. No, absolutely right. Which brings me to, there's this quote which I heard, and I was speaking with a priest recently, Father Josh Waltz. I don't know if you're familiar with him. I think he's fantastic. He's done some fantastic talks online if you want to look him up. And he's really on fire for Christ and the new evangelization. And so I heard this: if the priest is a saint, his parish will be holy. If the priest is holy, his parish will be good. If the priest is good, his parish will be nice. And if the priest is nice, his parish will be ungodly. And I spoke with him and mentioned this about the priesthood. And he said, actually, he'd heard it in reference to parents and children. So I must have heard a version of it that was twisted to speak about the priesthood. But in fact, if the parents are a saint, then their children will be holy. So there's such a connection there between, you know, how the parents live and the effect that's having on the children. This domestic church, you've spoken about that before. What responsibilities do different members of the family have in raising children in the faith? How should we understand that, Pierpaolo?
Well, I mean, the responsibility is kind of almost total to the parents. You know, that in one sense, that, you know, you make a promise that the day you marry, that you'll bring your children up in the faith. And myself and my wife, we are absolutely convinced that, you know, when we are, you know, when we go before the judge, that will be the first question. You know, what did you do to pass on the faith to your children? So from that perspective, I think, I mean, I always say you cannot kind of outsource the passing on of the faith to anybody as parents, not to the school, not to the parish, not to the priest. And, you know, I think that has to be kind of very clear to people. You know, you cannot sort of say, well, you know, I'll get the kids into a Catholic school and you know, they'll do it there.
Yeah.
I mean, because in one sense, if you haven't been doing it before the kids go to school, it's kind of too late anyway. You know, you need to be praying with the children before they can speak. You know, they need to be, those almost need to be kind of, you know, some of the first words that they learn from you need to be their bedtime prayers, so that they will always know that there are certain things that kind of belong together. You know, that you wake up, you pray, you go to sleep. Before you go to sleep, you pray. Before you eat, you thank God. All these things kind of can't happen without each other. So, you know, that has to be kind of the absolute priority. Now, that doesn't mean that, you know, it's guaranteed, you know, that your children will receive everything in the way that you want to, in the way that you put it across. But certainly, you know, it's very clear that children understand very quickly what your priorities are. I mean, you know, if you say that your priority is God, but then, you know, you're very happy to kind of miss mass for the football or to do other things or to go shopping, or, you know, what you say has no value at all. So the children will understand that God, you know, God first, and all the other things that we worry about, education, you know, good achievement, all these other things will be given you as well, but, you know, God first. And I totally I love what you're saying, and I've always thought the same about you know, the fact that the faith needs to be kind of strengthened through the generations. That it's a bit like, I mean, I always used to kind of think of it. I went to kind of one of these business seminars, and one of the things they said was that a company will either grow or it will shrink. It'll never just stay the same. And I think the same can be said for the faith, as it passes through the generations, that it'll either grow or it will shrink. You can't just sort of say, okay, you know, we'll be able to keep our kids at the same you know, level of engagement with the church that we're in. because, you know, the times they change, the world becomes more, it seems to me, the world becomes ever more hostile to our beliefs. So our children have to be, in a sense, more radical in their faith than we are, because the challenges that they are going to kind of encounter are going to be far greater than the ones that we encountered. Yeah. And so, you know, just to kind of just to think that they're going to be able to deal with that, with what the world kind of throws at them, with just a, you know, Sunday, you know, just an hour on a Sunday, that's never going to work. So I'm my own children, I'm very happy to say, are far more pious than I am. You know, they go to confession far more often than I ever did growing up, and I you know, I love that, and that didn't come from me. In a sense, all we could do is kind of bring them to let them have certain experiences, and just watch it kind of grow. So yeah, I think that's a very astute point, and I think one that's very important. That, you know, in a sense, we need to put the faith in all its kind of radicality in front of our children, and then, you know, help them to encounter it in all its beauty. Give them good experiences of the church. I mean, we're about to head off on our summer holidays, and one thing that we always do is kind of, before we start the beach bit, we always go on a little pilgrimage. So this year we're going to just near Milan, where the shrine of Saint Gianna Molla is, she's a brilliant saint. We've got 5 daughters, so I think she's a great saint for the daughters to understand, you know, what it is to be a woman, what it is to be a heroic mum. And so we're going to bring them there, a couple of days there, just to kind of show what the priority is, and then we'll have the rest of the holiday. And we've always tried to kind of do a bit of that, you know, bring them to beautiful places, bring them to meet, you know, good people, and I think God will do the rest.
Yeah, absolutely. We're exactly the same. Wherever we go, I'm not at home now, so we're on holiday in the Lake District. So the rest of the family are up a mountain, a big hill at the moment, and I'm here talking with you and very happy to be doing so. But wherever we go, there's always we begin by saying, well, we're going to find a parish church, we're going to find a place to go to mass, and even to pop in and just sit quietly and say prayer. And it's part of our holiday, whether we're in the UK or if we're in France. We go to France every year, and it's just they don't know anything else. They're very happy. It's to go that long, to be on holiday for 2 weeks or a week and not be able to go to mass, not be able to sit in a church, to be in the presence of God, would be such a lack that I think we'd all feel it. So it's saying, yes, of course we holiday, we celebrate, we have these times of rest, but it's not a goodbye to our faith, goodbye to religion, goodbye to God. That's part of it as well. So it's really, and actually we've had the kids look up and say, hey mum, dad, there's a church here, should we go to this one? And they're involved in that, and it's beautiful. And
it's a home away from home. It's like, you know, wherever you go. I mean, I think one of the most important things that we can pass on to our children is that, in the end, and this is particularly kind of easy for children of immigrants, is that it's clear that we don't really belong anywhere in this world. You know, when I'm in England, I feel very Italian. When I'm in Italy, I feel completely English. And you realize that, in fact, you don't belong in this world at all. We're made for something else. We're made for heaven. And, you know, wherever we go into a church, we feel at home, because that is our real home.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'll finish, Pierpaolo, by asking you about your role as Master of the Keys, at the Catholic Writers Guild of England and Wales. So I joined recently and met you there, and we had a fantastic talk from, I met Stephanie Block, and she spoke about the von Hildebrands, and that was really fantastic to listen to. Can you tell me a little bit about that? What is a Catholic writer exactly? Would it be as simple to say somebody who is Catholic who writes books? I'm thinking not. What would you say about that?
Well, I mean, the Catholic Writers Guild was set up in the 1930s by G.K. Chesterton and his kind of circle at G.K.'s Weekly, and they thought it was important in that time in which Catholic writing was at a real kind of in a moment of real flowering, you know, with the Catholic literary revival, War Green, Chesterton himself. They thought it was important for Catholic writers and journalists to be able to kind of meet together and speak a little bit and share their experience and kind of network, basically, because they all realized that, in fact, it was very important to be able to speak to a society which necessitated the good news in the same way that it always does, even more so today. Now, you know, what is a Catholic writer? I think that, you know, those, you know, War or Green, etc., wouldn't have said, you know, they weren't writing works of apologetics. They were writing works of literature. But in the end, I think the Catholic, the truly Christian writer sees the world with like a different pair of spectacles, through a different lens. What is great about those novels, what is great about them is that they're, you know, things which could be quite mundane in a sense, you know, the problems of everyday life or the moral decisions that we all have before us, suddenly in their writing become part of a kind of cosmic struggle, that the actions that we decide to take every day are not meaningless, they're not random, but they actually fit into a plan which God had from the very beginning, when he created the world, and have a consequence that stretches into eternity. And I mean, that makes for much more interesting, much more solid writing. It makes for much more dramatic storytelling if the things that we do have eternal consequences. And I think that's what you touch when you read the very best in Catholic literature. And I think for all of us who are involved in some way in producing Catholic writing, I mean, you know, my work at CTS is very kind of explicitly catechetical or sometimes apologetic, but also sometimes you want to read something which is more subtle, should we say. And I think that perhaps we are in a moment in which we need to be very, very clear, very, you know, we can't obfuscate the message or make it too subtle, because I think people nowadays would kind of easily miss the cues, miss the message. But on the other hand, neither should we be too heavy-handed, because it makes it less attractive. So I think that, you know, the old Catholic both and, you know, that it's the writer who is Catholic, but also and who is writing Catholic stuff, but also the Catholic who is writing, but with that vision of the world as something which has meaning, which has beauty, and which has consequence.
Yeah, absolutely. I read recently Flannery O'Connor's a book with some short stories, A Good Man is Hard to Find. And it's interesting because it's not overtly Catholic. You wouldn't read it and think this is a Catholic writer, but what it does is it forces you to see those little moments of grace, that penetration of grace in our lives, where we can either choose to accept or to turn away, and the consequences of turning away, the consequences of rejecting those moments to raise ourselves up, to lift ourselves up out of our sin. And it's funny and horrible and difficult to read, but I think she's brilliant. And again, that as a Catholic writer, that's open to anybody. It's not you don't have to be a Catholic to read it. It's not, it doesn't feel particularly Catholic, but it does sort of tap on our conscience, doesn't it? And say, you know, which way would you choose? What would you do? And it brings us to that, I suppose, the mind of God, the calling us to be something more than we are, to come out of our state of sin.
Absolutely. I mean, my favorite writer has been for many years is Chesterton himself.
Yeah.
And I just think he's such a great writer for the problems that we have today, in which kind of common sense seems to have gone out of the window. You know, he talks about, you know, there'll come a time when people will have to take up arms to say that the grass is green. And, you know, we see that in so many arguments, you know, about gender, about all this kind of stuff, where just to say the most commonsensical things, it now gets you into a lot of trouble. Chesterton would have loved it. He would have kind of, you know, ridden into battle with all his stylistic fireworks kind of blazing, and it would have been wonderful to see it. But I think even the things that he wrote back then speak very clearly to us today. And also what I love about him is that he makes kind of Catholicism sort of joyous,
yeah.
You know, full of life, full of enjoyment, of the good things in life, of, you know, the simple pleasures, the simple beauty of the world in which we live, which in the end, you know, sometimes I think you know, living in London, getting involved in all sorts of you know, political disputations, you know, looking at the way the world is going, sometimes it's good just to kind of pull back and see the beauty of a sunset or a leaf or a flower, all these things, and just saying, you know, actually the world is beautiful as God created it.
Yeah, we just need to look for it.
Yeah,
it's still there.
Yeah, absolutely.
There. We need to stop being so busy and take that time, as you said, the seasons, you know, we need to pay attention, and our faith helps us in that. Brilliant. It's lovely to hear about your children. It's the same with mine. I feel sometimes I look at them and think, my goodness, how are these our children? It's just so beautiful to see them living in a way, because I think with my parents there was a sense that they were just living the faith and trusting that living the faith was enough, and I fell away because so much of what I wanted to know there were no answers to. And so I think in a way we've learned from that, and we know now that we want to be able to answer our children when they come to us with questions about the faith. And so it's a learning experience for all of us, isn't it? But it's wonderful to see the kids
absolutely
thriving.
Yeah, and to give them an experience, because in a sense, I think, you know, there's a competition between what the world has to offer us and what the church has to offer us. And, you know, what the world has to offer us, kind of going back a bit to what we were talking about, you know, design and beauty, what the world has to offer us is always packaged very beautifully or you know, in a very sparkly way, but in the end it's kind of empty. And so what we need to do is we need to provide for our children an experience which is more fulfilling, more substantial than what they get from the world. And, you know, then they'll know where to come back when they're looking for something really, really meaty.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and a beautiful note to end on. Thank you, Pierpaolo. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope you have a fantastic holiday. You're off on Thursday, I think, aren't you?
Yes, yeah. Heading down to the beautiful island of Sicily, down where my wife comes from. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
That's like a couple of weeks, is it?
Yeah, even more.
Even more. Okay, take what you can. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me, and
Brill.
God bless and have a lovely holiday.
Thank you. Lovely to speak to you.
Bye-bye.